I'm Colby Smith. Subscribe to this channel on YouTube, please. Follow me on Twitter @ColbyJS. Some people ask me if I'm a painter. I mean, if I'm an artist or a taxi driver. No, I'm actually a painter and decorator. I drive a Daewoo. But the news today, this plane crash, the media is sickening. Like, this plane has gone down, and within like 12 hours they've stopped caring about the families. They stopped caring about the dead people. They stopped caring about even precisely getting a good viewpoint on who caused it. And they're already saying sanctions on Russia. Why is Putin not answering questions? Pro-Russian shot it down. I want to see some evidence before we start chucking around like baseless accusations. And another thing is, I've just listened to them reading out a list of names of these people. Not names, but just reading out the list of people. And they're basing the list of people on the nationality. They're saying, oh, 2 Chinese, 2 Britons, 5 Australians, whatever, I don't know the numbers. And as if we're, they're trying to, as if we're outraged that if no Britons died on this plane, we'd be like, But 2 Brits died, so we're like, right, that's it, we want justice, we want answers, we want the people who've done this brought into trial. I mean, does it really matter, the label, you're putting like a label on the people who died? Does it matter where they're from? They're human beings. Like, it shouldn't matter where they're from. We should want to bring justice to crimes, regardless of the victim, regardless of who done it, or for what their motive was. So I understand this labelling of death, like some countries' citizens are worth more than others, which they clearly are, if you look at the Gaza-Israeli situation going on over there. But the media is just like, they're calling for Cold War. They're calling for another Cold War against Russia. They want sanctions against Russia, even though Russia is supplying like half of all of Europe's natural gas. Like, we're going to put sanctions on Russia and then just going to freeze us to death over the winter. I mean, we started this war in Ukraine. We were over there calling for revolution. We was over there calling for the citizens to overthrow his government. And then now we're having to pay for the consequences of our actions, and we're not happy about it. I mean, I think Vladimir Putin has done considerably well, considering we started our civil war on his doorstep with one of his country's closest allies, and he's kind of, they took Crimea, which the world was outraged about, but I think he's done pretty well, considering, NATO are just like creeping onto his doorstep. It's stupid. We're not going to go to war with Russia. We're not going to put sanctions on Russia. The West, the UK, America, NATO, we're only going to go to war with countries with fucking little ragtag armies in the desert like Iraq and Afghanistan. We're not going to go to a war with a country that's going to be an actual world war. They're not that stupid. Why do you think they haven't actually gone to war with Iran, even though they've been gagging for it for the last like 2 decades? Because they've actually got a decent army, and there will be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of casualties. It's stupid. I mean, how can the media be braying for war like that? We are the ones paying for this. Me, you, the taxpayers. I don't want to pay for this anymore. I do not want to pay for this. I don't want to put my licence fee to the BBC so they can trump up this kind of doublespeak about Cold War. And at the same time, they're just absolutely gagging for war in Israel. They're saying, this is disgusting, Hamas, they're firing 200 rockets a day. But how many rockets a day is Israel firing in Gaza? I mean, it's shocking. I mean, I remember when Nelson Mandela died, and I found out for the first time that when Mandela was fighting for his freedom, when he was on the streets fighting, we were labelling him a terrorist. We were on the side of apartheid, and then years later, when he comes to power, we call him a hero. When he died, we call him a hero. I can pretty much guarantee the same thing will happen in 50, 60, 100 years' time, when if Palestinians get their freedom, they get their own state, we'll be looking back in history going, oh, you know, they fought the good fight, those Palestinians, we're proud of them, they're real heroes fighting for their freedom and for justice. It's sickening. Right now, the BBC is basically a mouthpiece for the Israelis. I mean, they're a little bit less biased than they were, say, like 5 years ago, when pretty much everyone I knew thought Palestinian was basically a terrorist state. Now that social media exists, I mean, they can't really lie anymore. But they're still pretty much a mouthpiece for the Israeli Defense Force, for the Israeli government. You had a video of 30 Palestinian gunmen had dug a tunnel into Israel, and they'd got out onto the beaches of Israel, and Israel drone striked them, unmanned drone striked them. And like Sky News and the BBC were kind of going for the angle that this like small group of men was going to somehow, it was like a serious threat to Israeli rule, like this little group of people were going to get into Israel and overthrow the Israeli government and wipe out the whole of Israel. Come on, get real. And they're using that as a justification for this ground invasion that is happening right now. Why isn't our government condemning this? Our government is so quick to condemn pro-Russian separatists for shooting down this plane. Our media was so quick to condemn, I mean. But yeah, they won't condemn Israel. Our government, I watched in Parliament yesterday or the day before, MPs after MPs constantly from both sides of the House. You had a Green MP, you had Conservatives, you had Labour, you had Lib Dem, you had Northern Irish, you had Scottish MPs condemning Israel's war crimes, calling it brutal, barbaric, saying it was an open-air prison, saying it's a genocide, saying that not when the bombs started falling, the whole world started paying attention, but the Palestinian people have been under siege, regardless of where the bombs fall. If there's a ceasefire in a week and the bombs stop falling, the Palestinian people are still under siege. They've got their water controlled by Israelis, their electricity is controlled by the Israelis, their sewage is controlled by the Israelis, any medicine that goes into Gaza is controlled by the Israelis. They're bombing their towns and cities, and they won't even let building material in so they can rebuild it. Where are these people supposed to go? It's just an absolute sickening double standards of morality by our government and our media. And I mean, people are protesting outside the BBC, and rightly they should, because whilst the BBC is feeding this like level of absolute bullshit consciousness into the minds of the citizens, while we still are on the side of the Israelis in this conflict, or on the side of the Ukrainian government in this conflict, then the people are going to be placated. They're not going to see anything wrong there. And when the people are lied to like that, we need people to be awakened so they can put pressure on our government, so our government can put pressure on the Israelis. Otherwise, our government is just thinking, well, the people of our country are fine with this, so, you know, we're representing the people, they're not complaining. It's the BBC, ITV, Sky News. These are the institutions that need to be burnt to the ground if this country has got any chance of, like, rising itself above this, like, petty level of war and corruption and greed. Until these institutions, until Rupert Murdoch gets the fuck out of our country, takes his money, takes his family, and takes his puppet media corporation with him, until that happens, we're going to be in the gutter. We're going to be in the gutter, and there's nothing we can do to raise our minds, our awareness out of that situation.